Shalom, shalom. This is Brother Stefano from the Verified Trinidad, here to review some more precepts once again. Before I start, I'd like to give all honor and glory to our Lord, Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahushai, for his truth, knowledge, wisdom, and especially understanding. Right? A special shout out to all of our brothers and sisters, keeping the commandments, pushing this truth, and you all here on this video with me. So with that being said, today's topic is going to be, am I in a cult? Are my works in vain? Because we know that once we're in this truth, we're faced with a lot of statements and questions from our own brothers and sisters, such as, hey brother, you're in a cult. Get out. What are you doing keeping all of these commandments? Right? So let's go through it, through the spirit, and examine some things, right? And hopefully everyone here will be edified, right? So let's go to the book of 1 Peter chapter 2 and verse 21. So it says, for even hereunto were ye called, because Hamashiach also suffered for us, leaving us an example that ye should follow his steps. And this is what everyone is trying to be like. Everyone is trying to be like so-called Christ, right? Everyone has the correct way to be like Christ, right? Then again, people are trying to be like so-called Christ, yet they're doing works of idolatry. They're doing works of being a whoremonger, right? So who's the imposter, right? Who is really the imposter, right? Everyone knows you should be doing this. No, you're not supposed to be doing this. You're supposed to be doing this, right? It's all a lot of confusion. And it says, leaving us an example that ye should follow his steps, right? So let's see what teachings and examples that the Lord left unto us, right? That we should be following, right? Because we know a lot of people are trying to be like Christ. So let's see what the Bible has to say, about this example, right? So this is the book of John chapter 14 and verse 15, Salakia. So it says, if ye love me, keep my commandments. And this is where all hell starts to break loose. This is where the so-called people who are trying to be like Christ be like, okay, all right, I know it says, keep my commandments, but brother, you're supposed to be keeping this amount, not this amount, right? You're supposed to be keeping this amount, not this amount, right? You see these commandments, okay, you could throw them away, but these commandments, all right, you can keep them, right? This is where all hell breaks loose, right? And this brings me to my main precept, right, on this topic, which is the book of Ephesians chapter 5. Ephesians chapter 5 and verse 6, right? Because everyone knows how to be like Christ. Everyone knows. So it says, Ephesians 5 and verse 6, right? It says, let no man deceive you with vain words, right? For because of these things cometh the wrath of God upon the children of disobedience, right? So we're going to be really talking about the vain man and the vain woman, the vain Christ and their vain works, right? So let me get an example of some things vain, right? A promise can be vain, right? For example, let's say that you're suffering and you're in a lower state and you need some money, you need some help, right? And you ask a brother for help, and he promised you, he's like, okay, brother, I see you going through all of these problems, right? So here what's gonna happen, right? So next week when I get paid, I'm gonna help you with that money what I get, right? So this is what I need you to do. I need you to don't do anything. Stay right there, right? Don't help yourself and wait until I help you, right? Yeah. And then when next week come, you suffer the wrath because you know that you're supposed to be helping yourself. That brother already forget you, right? He already forgot you. He already has his mind off of you. You know you're supposed to be helping yourself first before you get help, right? Yeah. And the vain words coming to the truth and the commandments is such as, all right, I know it says commandments, but you don't have to keep certain commandments, such as you don't have to keep the Sabbath, right? Go and make a dollar bill. I know it says does not eat unclean food, but hey, you can eat whatever you want. Hey, pork and stuff tasty as hell, eat it. You can eat whatever you want. those are vain words, right? So it says, for because of these things cometh the wrath of God upon the children of disobedience, and you let these people deceive you, right? So it says, be not ye therefore partakers with them. Verse 8, for ye were sometimes darkness, and now are ye light in the Lord, and walk as children of light. And what is this like? Light. And what is this we have to walk in? Let's go to the book of Proverbs. Proverbs chapter 6 and verse 23. Right, so this is Proverbs chapter 6 and verse 23. So it says, for the commandment is a lamp, and the law is light, and reproofs of instructions are the way of life. Right, so this is the light we walk in. We walk in the light of the commandments, right? Because keeping these commandments, once again, it changes you, right? It makes your soul perfect, right? And it's for your own good, and it's for your own salvation, right? So this is the light that we walk in, right? Serious, this is the light that we walk in. So let's examine also more characteristics of this so-called vain man, right? Because you know how people try to deceive you. Like, for example, let's say you talk to somebody about keeping these laws, and you talk to them, well, you're not supposed to be keeping Christmas, right? You know, Christmas is something unholy, right? And they'll be like, what? Christmas unholy? But what's the harm in Christmas? Where in the Bible did it say that you're not supposed to celebrate Christmas? And then, all right, you'll hit them the verse. You'll hit them, let me give you an example. You hit them Jeremiah 10, right? Jeremiah 10. You hit them Jeremiah 10 and verse 2. Thus said the Lord, learn not the way of the heathen, and be not dismayed at the signs of heaven, for the heathen are dismayed at them. For the custom of the people are vain, for one cutteth a tree out of the forest, the work of the hands of the workmen with the axe, and they deck it with silver and gold, they fasten it with nails and with hammers, that they move not. They are upright as a palm tree, but speak not. They must needs be born, because they cannot go. Be not afraid of them, for they cannot do evil, neither also is in them to do good. Right? So you hit them that precept, right? And what are some words they be like? They be like, well, man, I'm seeing it. I'm seeing it. Yes, this does sound like Christmas, you know. This does sound like Christmas, cause you know, what does the Christmas tree have to do with Christ and stuff? And then they'll go on to be like, but what's the harm in it, right? What's the harm in it? What's the harm in eating a little ham and celebrating all funs and joy with your family, getting all sorts of gifts? What's the harm in that? It's not harming me. Why should I stop it, right? Why should I stop it? And you see, it's because this vain man is carnal, right? He doesn't see the spiritual damage it causes, right? Because celebrating Christmas, it doesn't hurt you physically, but spiritually, it plays an impact, right? Spiritually, right? This vain man is carnal, right? Same thing for birthdays, right? Somebody might ask, say, okay, what? The Bible says you're not supposed to be celebrating birthday? What? Where? Right? And then you hit them the precept. You hit them Job 1 and verse 6. Salakia verse 4. Right? Job 1 and verse 4. So it says, and his sons went and feasted in their house, everyone his day, and sent and called for their 3 sisters to eat and drink with them. Verse 5. And it was so, when the days of their feasting were gone about, that Job sent and sanctified them, and rose up early in the morning, and offered burnt offerings according to the number of them all. For Job said, it may be that my sons have sinned, and cursed God in their hearts. Thus did Job continually, right? And then what are vain words? They will tell you. They will tell you, well, Brother, you don't know what Job and his three sons was doing. They were probably feasting and stuff, and there was an idol there, right? Yes, I see that, Job saying that my sons have sinned for celebrating their birthday. Yes, but brother, you don't know what they were doing. You weren't there, right? So these are some vain words that people hit you, right? These are the stuff and the works and the sayings of the vain man and the vain woman, the vain Christ and their vain works, right? Because they hit you all sorts of excuse just to do iniquity, all sorts of excuse, right? This is why you can't be deceived. You can't be deceived by them, right? You have to know who you're being around. You have to know who you're being around, like the Lord, right? Let's go to the book of John chapter 2 and verse 23. John 2 and verse 23. So it says, now when he was in Jerusalem at the Passover and the feast day, many believed in his name when they saw the miracles which he did. Right? But Yahushua did not commit himself unto them, because he knew all men. He knew all men, and needed not that any should testify of man, for he knew what was in man. Right? The Lord knew what was in man. Hey, he knew what he created. Right? He knew what he created. Right? And what's in the heart of men? Evilness, hatred, especially these Israelite men and women. Right? One sort of folly. Right? There were some people who probably wanted to speak to him just to become famous. Right? Just to try and entice him to do sin. Right? But hey, he did not commit himself unto them. Right? And just like the Lord is distant himself from certain people, you should too. Right? You should know this vain man. And once you realize, hey, brother, you're profiting me nothing. All you do is try to entice me and try to make me drop out of this truth. Then, hey, brother, I had to let you go. I have to let you go. Right? And it says, but Yahushua did not commit himself unto them, because he knew all men. And imagine if he used to speak plain. Imagine if, for example, there was this guy named Tom, and he came unto the Lord. Imagine if the Lord could have just say, like, okay, Tom, listen, I'm not dealing with you, because I know you're just here to make your friends think that, hey, we have some type of, relationship, some type of famousness you're trying to build on me, right? So imagine that, right? Let's go to the book of Romans chapter 2 and verse 20, right? Romans 2 and verse 20, right? And in this book, in Romans 2, it's just Paul jacking up the Pharisees, telling them that, what it is to be a Jew, right? Just a brief breaking down. But let's go to verse 20. So it says, and foolish instructor of the foolish, a teacher of babes, which has the form of knowledge and of the truth in the law. Right? Therefore, which teachest another, teachest thou not thyself? Thou that preachest a man should not steal, and dost thou steal? For example, the vain man teaches that, hey, thou shalt not sin. Yet you know that you're eating on one set of unclean foods. Right? You're teaching people not to sin, yet you yourself are committing sin. Right? Like, what sense is that? And you know in your heart, well, I'm doing the wrong thing. But because you submit to your flesh and it feels so good, right? Hey, I don't understand, right? So this is what the vain man is doing, right? This is what the vain man is doing. They preach and they tell you, hey, you don't have to keep the laws anymore. You don't have to keep his commandments. Oh, really? This is the book of Romans chapter 3 and verse 31. It says, do we then make void the law through faith? God forbid. Yea, we establish the law, right? And this is what everyone's trying to do. This is what the vain Christ and the vain works they do. They make void through the law, through faith. They be like, we don't have to do this anymore. We have faith, right? We don't have to say this anymore because we have faith, right? And you should know how and when to speak to these type of people, right? For example, when you're knowing the truth, you get like one set of power, one set of flame. You realize, hey, I'm an Israelite. I had to go and tell somebody. I had to go and tell somebody, right? I have to go and tell somebody. You go and you spread the gospel. And because they are more learned than you in iniquity, they tend to shut you down. And then you're questioning your faith. You'll be like, well, damn, I don't know if this is real. Like, for example, let me give some example. You tell someone that you're an Israelite and you have to keep these laws, and someone hits you, Colossians chapter 2 and verse 16, right? Colossians 2 and verse 16. So it says, let no man therefore judge you in meat or in drink or in any respect of a holy day or of the new moon or of the Sabbath days. So you're telling people that, hey, you're an Israelite and you're supposed to be keeping the laws, and then this vain man comes and tell you, hey, check out Colossians 2 and 16. It says, let no man therefore judge you in meats, meaning I could eat whatever I want, or in drinks, meaning I could drink whatever I want, or in respect of a holy day. And he changed this word holy day to holiday, right? In respect to a holiday, so that means I could keep Christmas, right? Or of the new moon or of the Sabbath days. So it doesn't matter if if I don't want to keep the Sabbath. It doesn't matter if I want to keep it or not. Let no man judge me, right? And then you go on to tell them, well, salvation is only for the Israelites, right? And then they hit you, Titus 2 and verse 11. Titus 2 and verse 11. So it says, for the grace of God that bringeth salvation had appeared to all men, right? And then you let that sink in and you be like, well, damn. Well, I don't know. I was thinking, this truth is garbage. And you let that vain man deceive you and you lose out on your position of life, right? Your name is blotted out of the book of life, right? Yeah. Let's go to the book of Hebrews chapter 5 and verse 12, right? Hebrews 5 and verse 12. So this is the book of Hebrews chapter 12, 5 and verse 12. So it says, For when for the time ye ought to be teachers, ye have need that one teach you again, which be the first principles of the oracles of God, and are become such as have need of milk and not strong meat. Right? So something I want to bring from this too is that when you have to go out there, right, and you have to go out and tell someone something, right? Sometimes you have to know when to speak, right? Sometimes you have to know when to say stuff. Sometimes you have to know when to, because you can't just go and tell somebody that, hey, you're an Israelite, hey, you're a Jew, and you have to keep his commandments, and you don't know one scripture relating to it, right? You might, mess up their thinking. Suppose, let's say they're part of the elect, and they're supposed to be waking up, and because you chose not the right time to speak, right, it might make things more harder. It might shake your faith in this truth, and it might make things more harder for them to come into this truth, right? So you have to know when to speak according to Ecclesiastes 3 and verse 8, right? You have to know when to speak, right? You have to know when to do things, right? And you have to be careful from these vain men and these vain women with their vain words. For example, someone might come at you and be like, okay, you're Israelite, but hey, the Israelites is no more. They're no more, right? Like, check this out. If you ask or type on Google, like, for example, where are, yes, sir, Slovakia. Right, where are the Israelites today? Let me see this. All right. So it says, although the Bible does not specifically name the modern nations representing all of these people, there is biblical history and archaeological evidence that make it possible for us to positively identify the United States, Britain, and many of the nations of the Western Europe as the nations where descendants of the 12 tribes of Israel largely reside today. While this historical knowledge is not critical for salvation, it does help one understand end time prophecy, right? So, hey, check this out. Hey, this is vain words. It says, while this historical knowledge is not critical for salvation, right? It does help one understand end time prophecy, right? So that's more vain words they might hit you. That's more vain words a vain man might hit you. Like, for example, you don't have to keep these laws, right? You don't have to realize you're an Israelite for your salvation. Didn't the Lord ask or say in Isaiah chapter 1 and verse 3, right? Isaiah 1 and verse 3. The ox knoweth his owner, and the ass his master's crib, but Israel doth not know, my people doth not consider. Right? So if you not knowing you're Israelite isn't necessary for salvation, then why did the Lord say this in Isaiah 1 and verse 3? Because it's important to know your heritage. It's important to know where you come from, right? To get your own salvation. Because after you get this truth and knowledge and understand, you change. Your soul change. The reason why plenty of our people are so lost and behaving like criminals and nothing, not so-called good for nothing, right? Is because they don't know their nationality. They don't know their heritage, right? They don't know who they are according to the Bible, right? That's why they're so lost, right? Didn't the Lord say in Jeremiah chapter 3 and verse 23 that salvation is vain for the nations? Didn't the Lord say that salvation is vain for the other nations? Let's get to Jeremiah. Let's get it and break it down. Jeremiah chapter 3 and verse 23. So it says, truly in vain is salvation hoped for from the hills and from the multitude of mountains. Truly in the Lord our God is the salvation of Israel. Right? And we know that this isn't ordinary hills and this is ordinary mountains, right? How do you know that? Well, let's break it down precept through precept, right? Precept upon precept. Here a little, there a little, right? Through precept, I get understanding. So let's break it down. So let's go to the book of Isaiah chapter 2 and verse 2, right? To know this isn't ordinary mountains. Isaiah 2 and verse 2. So it says, and it shall come to pass in the last days that the mountain of the Lord's house shall be established in the top of the mountains, and shall be exalted above the hills, and all nations shall flow into it. This doesn't mean that when the Lord comes back, right, he's gonna have a big mountain like Mount Everest, and you have to climb from the bottom and get all the way all to the top. You're tired halfway, right? And you had to keep going just to meet the house of the Lord. No, this is talking about status power, right? Because when the Lord come back, the only power that there is to rule is His and His kingdom, right? Let me give some more example. 2 more precepts. This is the book of Revelation, chapter 17 and verse 9. Revelation 17 and verse 9. So it says, and here is the mind which hath wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 mountains which the woman sitteth, right? And there are 7 kings. 5 are fallen. There is one, and the other is not yet to come. And when he cometh, he must continue a short pace, right? So we see in its status, its power, its kingdoms, right? Let's get one more. Let's go to the book of Micah chapter 4 and verse 1. Micah 4 and verse 1. So it says, but in the last days it shall come to pass. Yes. But in the last days it shall come to pass that the mountain of the house of the Lord shall be established in the top of the mountains, and it shall be exalted above the hills, and all people shall flow unto it. Doesn't mean the Lord is going to have a house shaped like a mountain, his kingdom. Right? So let's go back to Jeremiah chapter 3 and verse 23. Right? And let's see if it finally makes sense now. Jeremiah chapter 3 and verse 23. It says, truly in vain is salvation hoped for from the hills and from the multitude of mountains. Right? Because what is mountains and hills? Hills asking for salvation for. Can a hill speak? Can a mountain speak? Are the mountains outside really being like, Lord, please, I'm fed up being on this earth. Please help us. Please come for me. Is this happening? No. These are nations. These are men. Right? Truly in vain is salvation hoped for from the hills and from the multitude of mountains, meaning nations. Truly in the Lord our God is the salvation of Israel. Right? So with that, I like to say shalom. Right? I'm going to close off. I hope this was edifying. Remember to know who you are wronged. Remember to don't let deceived by this vain man, because they can sift out your reward, which is to get eternal life, which is to get into the kingdom. Right? So with that, I like to close off, and I hope this lesson was edifying.